Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to this fourth and final session of our DBX EU MODEX conference on marine pollution, and a warm welcome also to our virtual audience, just in case anyone is tuning in out there for the first time. And we appreciated the sort of copious questions that came in the last session, so do be advised just to find the link to our Mentimeter conference tool in the YouTube chat. And do feel free to give us your questions. We are going to dive right in. This is the home stretch, of course. Hope everybody's had a little more caffeine just to get us to the end. We've got 3 more presentations lined up, and then we will have a concluding panel to talk about some outcomes. But I think, first of all, everybody is quite happy to realize that a lot of ideas and solutions are being discussed here. And for that reason, also, our YouTube stream is very important. And we hope that we can find some multipliers out there who will, talk to their own communities, and everything that has been done here and all of your hard work will be available for those people to share and profit and benefit from. Well, next up we have Justiina Halonen, who works as a research manager at the Southeastern Finland University of Applied Sciences. Now that has a very interesting name. It's called Xamk. Xamk, if you see it, for short. And they have expertise not only in ports and railway logistics, but also transport systems and supply chains, and in environmental effects and the safety of those logistics. So Justiina is head of research in the fields of maritime emergency management and oil spill response, and she's contributed to developing the Finnish rescue services response capabilities since 2006, so already a good long time. And today she'll be giving an overview of their new approaches to oil spill response research here in Finland. Please give her a warm welcome. Justiina Halonen.
Thank you, and good afternoon also all you there attending online. My name is Justiina Halonen, and I work for University of Applied Sciences, shortly Xamk, which is one of the Finnish universities providing maritime education. My presentation deals with recent approaches to spill response research here in Finland, and I have divided my presentation into 2 sections. First, I would like to introduce you our research network, and then I will present our newest oil spill response research environment, oil spill response test basin, and how we came to set it up and how we have used it so far. So I'm going to give some examples of the research activities we have carried out using it. But first, a few words of the network, which was established in 2005, when those of us having marine or maritime-related research activities, we joined our forces and formed a joint research association called Kotka Maritime Research Center. Our members include universities and other research institutions, governmental agencies and authorities, 13 organizations in total. And this slide shows those members who have continuously carried out spill response related research, and also those members that form the core of our network. There is 5 of us, each having our own perspective on response related research. There is the pointer. Aalto University is studying maritime safety in the point of view of marine technology and engineering, such as ship crashworthiness and damage stability. They have also carried out maritime risk modeling to identify those high-risk locations where an oil spill is likely to occur. They have also modeled potential oil outflow volumes in different grounding and collision scenarios. Then there is University of Turku. Their researchers, they are focusing on maritime logistics systems, and in context of a oil spill, they are studying how such a disruption in maritime traffic would affect shipping and economics. Then there is University of Helsinki, who is analyzing the environmental effects and consequences following a spill, the impacts on species and on habitats and on marine ecosystems as a whole. They have, for example, produced seasonal sensitivity maps to support protection prioritization, and also recommendations on how to decontaminate the sensitive or endangered habitats. At the moment, they are analyzing the role of shared situational awareness and decision-making by using disaster simulations. Then there is Finnish Environment Institute, known as Syke, which is analyzing the oil spill response methods from the point of view what kind of environmental impacts the response methods themselves would have. Recently, they've been focusing on chemical and biological response methods, such as use of dispersants and microbes and their feasibility in cold climates. Well, it's working now. Then there is us, Xamk, and we have taken the most practical approach to spill response research. We are focusing on the spill response management, how to conduct the response operation as a whole, how to carry out those response methods, and also how to, in practice, how to cope with that potentially a massive amount of oily wastes. And this kind of interdisciplinary approach has been very useful. It has enabled us to gain more holistic overview of the spill response research than each of us alone would have got. So I think this cross-university collaboration has been very useful. And I'm also looking forward to new forms of collaboration in the near future, as we can now take advantage of this new research environment that we are having. We have established a oil spill response testing and training facility, which is operated by Xamk, and it's available not only those other members of our network, but also to authorities, voluntary organizations, and businesses as well. It is located about 80 kilometers to east from here in the city of Kotka. It's recently established, so there are still some facilities to come, but at the moment it consists of a main basin about 30 meters in diameter and with water depth of about 3 meters. Then there is also smaller test tanks for onshore and on-water recovery measures, a couple of soil units, and a water channel for response demonstrations in flowing waters or currents. And we are developing the area step by step, and although it feels that we have just getting started, this basin has already taken us to a whole new level when it comes to operational relevance. This is mainly because we hadn't had the opportunity to use real oil here before. Besides, we hadn't had a major oil spill here in Finland since the grounding of Antonio Gramsci, was it 1987? This is fortunate, of course, but it also means that we have little practical experience in responding to larger spills. And to tackle that, we have tried to do what we can to learn from the incidents elsewhere. We have studied those case histories very carefully, their safety investigation reports, and also good practice guidelines and contingency plans of other countries. And we have tried to adopt the lessons learned and then adjust them into our operating environment. And with the expertise from the smaller cases we have compiled all that information into spill response manuals. We have ended up compiling manuals both for marine oil spills and inland water oil spills, both for open water conditions and ice conditions. But however, it felt that we stood on a rather theoretical basis, and the next step was to use simulation to have something more concrete or tangible to build on. We launched a oil spill response simulator training using full-scale navigational bridge simulators with a specific program to model oil behavior. And that oil modeling turned out to be a very realistic one, so it helped us to demonstrate the oil spill-related phenomena, such as the concept of critical speed, and all in all, how the oil tends to spread in water and drift at sea, for example. It also turned out that simulation was and is still a very effective tool in improving marine response-related skills. For example, fleet management, communication, and vessel maneuvering skills. For instance, towing in multi-vessel configurations while maintaining good or effective communication between the bridges. And one of the benefits the simulation have that you can choose a specific sea area, build a risk-based scenario there, then bring in your resources, and then check if they match. And this way, simulation supports also contingency planning. And with the ease of repetition, that you can start the same mission over and over again, that makes simulation a very good tool to compare different approaches or response options, and also this way various tactics. But it wasn't until we get the basin that we were able to verify our technical performance. Now we have a place where to really test whether our planned measures would really work. A place where we can turn theory into practice or preaching the research to response, so to speak. We have had several training sessions already with the rescue services and environmental agencies, also with NGOs. We have carried out various equipment and product tests, and recently also demonstrations to study the spill behavior of different products. And like the previous speakers, we too have been very interested in new fuels, basically the bio-based and renewable fuels, how would they behave when spilled to water, and how our equipment are coping with them. A week ago, we were also able to test in a small scale how the presence of ice would affect the spill behavior. One of the research topics that we have been addressed to and are also going to focus more in the future is the safety of responders. We have carried out tests where we measure the flammability and the harmful concentrations the responders are exposed to during different stages of response operation. These slide diagrams are from a test where we demonstrated a crude oil spill, and with the help of a couple of fixed and portable gas detectors and also air samples that were attached near the responders' breathing zone, we measured the concentrations over a 2-day testing period and then analyzed where the risk was the highest during different working stages. Our aim is to continue to systematically generate this kind of safety information, also in relation to new fuels. Yes, thank you for your time. From this address, you can find more information of our activities, and it will also guide you to the network of our research. Sorry, to the web page of our research network. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Justiina, and I'll just ask you to take a seat up here. Thanks for that overview of this very new, holistic and collaborative approach to oil spill response research, and I'm sure there will be a number of questions from the audience on that. Let's turn our attention now to the wildlife that has been mentioned on a number of occasions, and the impact that oil spills can have on the fauna and flora of all of these affected regions. Vanessa Ryan is currently the chair of the European Oiled Wildlife Response Network. That's EUROWA. It was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations. And as a marine biologist and marine conservation officer at WWF Finland, she's also a specialist on national, regional, and international marine policy. So she trains volunteers for shoreline cleanup and wildlife response as part of WWF Finland's voluntary oil spill response program. And she's going to be talking about bridging some of the gaps in oil spill response with regard to wildlife. So please give her a warm welcome, Vanessa Ryan.
Thank you for the introductions, and dear participants, I would like to first of all thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity on behalf of the EUROWA network to come here and talk about wildlife response today. And let's see if this works first of all. Whoop, too fast. Yes. Okay, so I can see you're all shouting with excitement at the sight of yet another acronym, EUROWA. So it's the European Oiled Wildlife Assistance Network. I'm sure you will all remember it after today. And I will talk today, as indicated, about bridging some of the gaps in oiled wildlife response. And I think from the discussions we've had over the past 3 days, it's quite evident that it's a topic that would need to be more integrated in the overall spill response. And there are some gaps that I will talk about later as well that were identified as part of the exercise over the last few days. So in this presentation, I'll give you a brief overview of what EUROWA is, what we can provide, both during just a preparedness phase and in an actual spill, but also a little bit about what we need, what kind of support we need from national and regional authorities in order to be able to function and give you the best support possible. And then, as indicated, I'll go through a little bit what the current gaps are that we see on a national level and also on a regional and European level in oiled wildlife response preparedness. Yes. Okay, so what is EUROWA? It was actually, it is a network that was initiated more formally in 2015. This was made possible due to funding that we received by the EU Civil Protection Mechanism and prior to the more formalized work that we did during a couple of projects, there was this kind of loose cooperation between organizations in Europe that were dealing with oiled wildlife response and essentially had to respond to different spills that happened in Europe. But the network was never really formalized, and this funding provided a great opportunity for us to finally, make a more connected network and also join ourselves around common standards that we can all agree to. So the aim really is to enhance cooperation between oiled wildlife response organizations on a European level and also to create a solution for mutual assistance in the case of a spill and assisting authorities when that happens. You can see here on the screen our mission, so to support and empower EU authorities, NGOs and polluters and other stakeholders in dealing jointly with the oiled wildlife response issues. according to agreed standards. So it's really about providing a more professional approach to old wildlife response, because as we've seen over the days here, discussing about self-mobilizing citizens that might be really emotional about what is happening, both on environmental impacts in general, but also regarding old wildlife and seeing animals suffer. That is a real powerful motivator for people to self-mobilize, and that's definitely what we don't want to see in a spill, because that causes chaos. And our aim is to have representation of EUROWA network members in each EU coastal country. You can see here on the screen the current members. I won't go through them all because I have only 15 minutes. And Justiina was able to keep her presentation to exactly 15 minutes, so I'll try to do the same. But you can all go to the EUROWA website and look at them closer when you have the chance, and I'll give you the address at the end of my presentation. And and what we've really essentially done is we've organized ourselves around a common charter, which is really important for us to, it's a signal for all the organizations that they are signing up to and agreeing to use certain standards and agreed training methods and rehabilitation processes, etc. So it creates that unified response over a European level. I've roughly divided now our activities into two, and I have very little time, so I'm going to go through them quite quickly. Firstly, I'm taking up the subject of advancing preparedness, which is one of the aspects of our work. So really this is about promoting cooperation, both nationally and on a regional level and on an EU level, between NGOs and authorities and other stakeholders. So making those connections, ensuring that communication channels are opened up and we can have a meaningful dialogue and advanced preparedness. We do this on a national level via our network members. So for example, WWF Finland, which is a national organization dealing with old wildlife, and a EUROWA network member as well would be in touch with our national authorities in all matters old wildlife. But we also act on a regional level, so we are observers via the network itself and via our secretariat, Sea Alarm, which provides our secretarial functions for us. We're observers in the Bonn, Rempik and Helcom agreements. So what we do is apart from encouraging this cooperation between authorities and NGOs, we also provide standardized training portfolios for responders. This is really important because in a spill you need to be able to utilize all the expertise that is available in different European countries. So we train people on 6 different levels, roughly in 3 different categories. So firstly, hands-on responders that would be doing the actual work. So making sure that animals are washed properly and fed and captured, etc. And then we would have the management level training as well. So ensuring that the whole response is managed in a good fashion. And then lastly, we have a EUROWA team level training, which is intended for people who would essentially go abroad in a spill to assist a country that needs expertise and help. We also develop and publish best practice guidelines. You can see some of them on the screen. We have a whole bunch of them ranging from facility handbooks to rehabilitation processes, how you should rehabilitate the birds according to best standards. Not all of them are publicly available because they're usually linked to a training. So you would access that standard or guideline when you have participated in a training event, but there are some of them that are public, and especially I encourage you all to look at our standard operating procedure, which is publicly available for everyone to take a look at. It is important to highlight at this point that the EUROWA network isn't like a magic button. I said that in one of the groups earlier during the discussions. It's not a magic button to just press and we'll come in and sort out all your wildlife problems. There are certain things that we need if we're going to respond in an actual emergency. So we do provide a pool of expertise for emergencies, trained experts that are all trained to a certain level according to our joint training standards. And we also have an equipment pool that is situated in Belgium, and you can see some of the equipment there in the picture. So it's essentially a module of qualified experts plus equipment. And the point is we can support and integrate with the local and national responders who are on scene. So we would essentially make up that tier 3 level team that would come in and assist the local and national organization. But of course, this requires certain things also from the country that we are going to respond in. We can't just come in and magically conduct the whole oiled wildlife response on our own. We need an incident management system that oiled wildlife response can integrate into easily. And we've been talking about this integrated approach to the management of spills all week, basically. We also need an authority-led wildlife response coordination unit, someone who has the overall responsibility for the oiled wildlife response in that incident. And of course, a tier 3 liaison officer to support our experts who are coming in. So what is our vision and what is currently missing? I was talking about the things we need in a spill, and in order for a country to be able to prepare for oiled wildlife response and be able to, get the assistance from the EUROWA network, there are certain things that we recommend you'd have in place before a spill happens. So the first of them is a national wildlife response plan, and we've been talking about that as well, identifying that there are a number of countries present here as well today that don't have such a plan yet. So we can also help you with developing such a plan. We have a template plan available as well that will give you indications of what to put into such a plan. So it would need to consist of, identifying the wildlife risks that you have in a country, identifying the worst case scenario that you could be faced in a spill, identifying the resources you have nationally, the people, the managers, volunteers, equipment, facilities, and what strategies you want to utilize in case of a spill. Then what we recommend is having wildlife training and exercising, of course, tied to the oiled wildlife response plan that you have. So making sure that oiled wildlife is also part of the training, national training program, and a part of exercises like this exercise, discussion-based exercise we've had here. Ideally, you would have a multi-annual preparedness program or project that would really aim to, pushing your preparedness and forward in a more strategic way, having a vision for where you want to go regarding oiled wildlife response, and the National Wildlife Response Plan would obviously be a part of this. And with these things, if you have these things in place, then the EUROWA network can come in with their expertise and their equipment and slot into your system in a orderly fashion. And also to remember is that you can, once you have a EUROWA network member or EUROWA trained experts in your own country, those experts can, when they reach a certain qualification, also assist other European countries, and in that way also build up the expertise and knowledge in your own country by responding in other European countries. Some things that we've noticed that are still missing, we conducted a desktop study, and as a part of the desktop study we interviewed network organizations that are members of EUROWA to identify the kind of missing links in a lot of the countries that we're working in at the moment. So one link that is commonly missing is the direct communication channels. So often NGOs would be left to their own devices, oiled wildlife seen as a kind of separate entity that is taken care of by someone else. So those direct communication channels between authorities and NGOs are often missing. Another thing is a budget, so a longer-term budget which would secure the resources for and costs for training and equipment and upkeep of equipment and exercises, etc. So a dedicated oiled wildlife response budget is often missing. So we are relying often on budgets that would come from project funding, which is of course always only for a certain amount of years. Then what's often missing is the training. So no national training programs for oil wildlife response. And the same goes for exercises. Often we see that large-scale oil spill exercises or even small-scale or tabletop exercises don't adequately consider oil wildlife response aspects. And this is obviously something we would like to see changed as well. Thank you. I think this was it for me. So any questions you have, you can address hopefully via your Menti questions, and you can find us here, contact details. We're on Twitter, and we have our website that you can visit with all the training material and more information on our partner or network organizations.
Thanks very much to Vanessa Ryan of EUROWA, and a lot of places where EUROWA can be stepping in to offer expertise for countries that don't have their own national wildlife response plans in place. Among other things, simulation was mentioned in Justiina's presentation just a few moments ago, and our final presentation is from a company that does cutting-edge VR simulations. They're called VSTEP simulation, and many will have noticed the videos that you've been working with, the video at the beginning of our day today. They were designed by VSTEP simulation, and Luuk ten Bergen is a business developer at VSTEP, and he's going to talk about how simulation training globally can contribute to the live practice in the field of marine emergency response. So please put your hands together, and we'll let Luuk round off this session.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the kind introduction, Karin. I am here. I am thrilled to be here this week. Let's start with that. I have learned truly a lot from all the experts that are here in this room this week. And in the coming, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, I would like to give back a bit, and I hope to teach you something for a change. I am going to talk about human response training and maximizing impact through simulation. If you would put it in a bit of more informal words, what are the benefits of simulation? My name is Luuk. I'm working at VSTEP, and like Karin already said, we are developing education solutions for both the emergency response as well as the maritime industry, and we do this in virtual reality. And for this presentation, I've been collaborating with KSK Group. They are developing crisis management and staff training tools, but then in augmented reality. They are a bit different from each other, but we saw while we were collaborating on this that there are a few similarities in the approach of how we see our training tools. We see this mostly in the methodology, where they call it simulate, assess, and analyze. We call it create, train, and debrief. Who had it first? I'll let in the middle for now. What does it mean? Create means, or simulate means, the instructor is creating an environment where the training can take place in. He gets a set of tools with environments and content, and any situation can be created here. Then we go to the second step, which is the training phase. How this works is a trainee is placed in an environment, and he assesses the training, and via communication he develops a strategy together with the other trainees as well as the instructor, and commands his strategy towards the instructor, and then the instructor can implement that in the developed scenario. And that's how they work towards a stable situation. This can be both done local or networked. We saw all in COVID that it is nice to have to be able to remotely connect to each other if you are in different countries, for example. And the training will be fully recorded, and this is then for the debriefing mode, which is step 3. In debriefing, you can look back at your training, see what went well, what went wrong, and what you can develop for the next session. Another thing that is a benefit of the debriefing is so you can learn from your own actions, but more than that, you can also learn from somebody else's actions. We saw in the title of the presentation human response training. And so how do we train this human response or this human factor in training or in training? One of them is trial and error. In simulation, you get the tools to really try out new things, to see if it works, and to see what actions can lead to casualties. One more. I think we can agree that this is a clear error. Second one is engineered failure. It's another method that is widely used in simulation-based training. Engineered failure means that the parameters in the training created by the instructor are put up in a way that the trainee is almost certainly doomed to fail. This sounds maybe a bit cruel, but there's actually an idea behind it, and that is that that you learn more from mistakes. So if everything goes well, you don't really learn anything, and if you make mistakes, you know what steps not to take. Then the next one is experience your consequences of your decisions. I don't know if you can see it, but I think these consequences are quite severe. And then I mean consequences of your own decisions. Where in real life training, a training is normally stopped at the moment it tends to go wrong. Instructor can really let it go out of hand in simulation-based training. So what that means in real life training, you can only assume consequences, where in VR you can really experience them as a trainee. And I think debriefing also counts in line with the human response training, but we already touched upon that one. Wants to go to the next one. Then the next topic I would like to talk about is the learning cycle. Is it the pointer? Yeah. It's quite a widely known learning cycle, and I believe you also use it. Oh, one back. In a different kind of form. But I will focus today on this one. To start with, theoretical training. What I would like to emphasize with this cycle is VR training, simulation-based training can come back in all steps of this cycle. If we look at theoretical training, it's normally done with a piece of paper or a slideshow. But with simulation, you can really visualize what you're telling. So what you're seeing here is you see two instructors teaching their classroom about the theory of this training. Next step is practical training. I think simulation-based training is mainly built for this type of training. And here you see 3 people in a practical training assessing the situation together with their instructor. Third step is field experience. Here simulation is more indirect. Because it's field experience, you really have to do that in the field. But when you come back from your field trip, for example, you can put the situation in the simulator and go back to it, see if you would take the same steps or that you would try something else. And then next step, incident analysis, where this is where debriefing comes back. And then the cycle starts again. If I can quote Hugo from Monday, if you stop learning, you stop being an expert. So here, you start again with theoretical training. Then there's a few key benefits that we stated. I will quickly go through them all and then emphasize the most important ones. So with simulation training, you can build up situational awareness. You can train emergency decision making. You can teach effective use of resources without using actual resources. Building a common operational picture is what we've been doing here the whole week. Command and control coordination, opportunity for remote training. Justiina already mentioned this one, the repetitiveness of your training. You can really go on and on and on until you're satisfied with the result. You can practice alternative response strategies, and it enriches physical training and further advanced responder preparedness. To take 3 of those out and emphasize them a bit. Building situational awareness. What we mean with that is if you've trained on something already in the simulator and it happens in real life, you know better what steps to take because you already did it. Emergency decision making, we saw it in the engineered failure. You can really put a lot of stress on somebody when they are in a training, and with that you can strengthen their stress intake and people are better prepared to make decisions in stressful situations. And then going to the last one, enrich physical training. So we don't think that simulation training can replace physical training. We see it as an asset to it. We think the combination of simulation training and physical training are a good combination for a well-developed training strategy. There's 3 things that I would like to summarize from what I've just told. And if those are only the 3 things that you remember from this presentation, I would be super happy. One is that simulation-based training gives you the tools to really experience consequences in a safe environment. 2, it gives you the tools to learn from your own mistakes and also from someone else's mistakes. And 3, it enriches physical training, and together with that, it makes a perfect combination for your training methods. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to Luuk for explaining the benefits of simulation training in such an easy to consume fashion. That was fantastic, and I think everybody probably has already really benefited from the videos that they were able to use in the 4 different phases in this exercise. Thanks to all of you for all of your presentations, and I do have a number of questions here, and a lot of them tend to be really directed at the individual. So I'm going to start with you, Justiina, because of course a lot of things came in whilst Vanessa was talking. And the first question here that I have for you is, can other countries train tackling oil spills at your facility?
Absolutely. It's open for everyone. Just contact me, please.
Okay, so that's a practical question and a practical answer, and obviously you need to be taking down the coordinates of the Xamk. Another question here is, how long is a training session for beginners in the simulation center, and how large can the groups be?
Actually, this can be tailored based on the needs of our client, which usually are the rescue services or border guard experts. So it can be tailored based on their needs. Sometimes if they have no prior experience in vessel maneuvering, for example, so then we have to take a little more time to get them used to how those navigational equipment works. But if they have already that kind of information and skills, then we can just jump to the main point, that is the spill response skills.
There's obviously a lot of interest here as to what exactly you can do in that simulation center. Do you have a wave simulator, for instance?
Yeah, this oil spill response training simulator, we can use full-scale navigational bridge simulators, which imitate the bridges of response vessels with all those navigational equipment. But in that simulation program, there is a possibility to use booms or recovery equipment, and there is a oil spill modeling, which also reacts to your actions, so you can get feedback what you have done, how your booming is going to, is it successful or not? Are you proceeding too quickly or not? So that's the basically the environment what we can do.
And I'm just wondering what your response is to what they're doing there, seeing as you're doing virtual reality training. Before I move on to Vanessa, what would your response be to, or how would you possibly also collaborate with a physical training like that is to some degree also a simulation, but in actual time? Yes, of course. Pardon me, these microphones.
Yes, yeah, I was happily surprised to see that you're also using simulation-based training, and I'm very curious to hear what it is all that you're doing with it. You already explained a bit about it, of course. Yeah, of course, there's the possibility for collaborations. So I would love to talk about that a bit later.
Thank you very much. And Vanessa, I'm going to come over to you because there are some questions here. You mentioned, of course, that not all countries in Europe have a national wildlife response plan, and the question is which or how many nations in Europe still don't have one. And so how much progress do we need to make?
Well, I haven't counted them myself, but I know a number of countries here that don't have them. So it's really a matter of you know, a significant number of countries that haven't finalized, maybe are in the process of working on a national oiled wildlife response plan or not.
An oiled wildlife response obviously is necessary for a country with a coast, but so countries in the interior or landlocked countries in Europe then would not have such a response plan, would they? Or would they need that even for large, for instance, for river bodies? And
for river bodies, for example,
lakes.
For lakes. I mean, in Finland we have the Saimaa lake area with significant traffic as well, and an endangered seal species. So there are definitely also inland lake areas that would need oiled wildlife response plans.
So, and another question is the response to oiled wildlife a task that's led by an authority in all states or most, or how helpful would an EU-level authority in something like this be?
Well, our vision is, of course, that there would be a designated national authority in every country who is responsible for oiled wildlife response, be it an environmental agency or another agency that is involved somehow in environmental monitoring or in oil spill response. So that is really the starting point, is that you have a designated authority who is responsible for developing that plan and mapping out who the stakeholders are that need to be involved in making that plan. There's a significant amount of stakeholders and resources you need. You need to have veterinarians, you need to have biologists who are, you know, can assess which are the risk areas that you need to focus on. You need to have that maritime sector and the civil protection sector coming in, also, you know, cooperating with the oiled wildlife rehabilitators and NGOs that would be involved. So there's a broad range of aspects that you need to take into account.
Luuk, do you feel that could virtual reality also support volunteer training for the volunteer training of the type that Vanessa does for oiled wildlife response?
Yeah, I think so. I think any given scenario can be put in a
into a VR setting.
In a VR setting, indeed, and as long as it's on a strategic level, I think simulation can also play a role in that. Definitely, yeah.
Here's a very interesting question that harks back to the discussion that we had earlier about all of the low sulfur fuels and the proliferation of the types of fuels, and we'll obviously look at this in all of these scenarios. But a question to you, Justiina, can you actually do chemical fingerprinting of oils?
No, not at the moment.
No.
No.
Okay, so this is not something that, is that something that any of your partners in the Kotka alliance there would be looking at?
Yeah, maybe there is some service providers that can do it, laboratories, and also I think our police forces has the laboratories to do it, but not us, at least yet.
Okay, so there's an area that we need to also be looking at. Another question for you, Vanessa, is wildlife response covered by a module that is presently part of the civil protection mechanism?
That
We
is
were talking about the need for training, so tell us a little bit about that.
That is a process that we would like to develop further. At the moment, we are more or less in an unofficial module of experts and equipment that can be mobilized or activated via the ERCC on a more informal basis, but also activated via sea alarm and mobilized via sea alarm. So we do exist, but then that is a case of a country that has a marine emergency contacting sea alarm directly and mobilizing us in that case. But it would be absolutely fantastic if we could be, part of a civil protection, like an official module that could be activated and mobilized.
You were telling me yesterday that WWF Finland actually has a very different approach to this than WWF in other countries. Can you describe how you meant that and what it is that you're doing here in terms of the training of volunteers?
Yeah, I'd say we're quite unique in a way that we, quite early on, after there were a number of spills in Europe, this Prestige spill, for example. So in 2003, we decided, because of the changing risk profile in the Baltic, there was a heavy increase in oil transport, maritime traffic in general, and the risk was considered to be significant. And looking at our long and jagged and very complicated coastline and the potential impact that shoreline oiling would have on, a range of different parts of society and the environment, we decided to start training volunteers that would be utilized then in a spill and working under the authorities. So we would always be mobilized and called to act by the authorities and work under them. And this has been since 2003. We've been training volunteers for shoreline response, and a few years later we started with the old wildlife response as well.
Okay, thanks for that information. Now I'd like to get you to weigh in on the discussion with respect to low sulfur or alternative fuels, because you were listening with great interest earlier. What issues do you anticipate in the future for wildlife response, given the multiplicity of substances that you're going to be dealing with?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question, and I think that would really require a lot of research as well. I was listening really with interest about the projects that have been developed for just, looking into how these different fuel types behave in the water, and obviously the behavior of them on the water and in the environment has a great impact also on wildlife and the risk of wildlife being oiled. If the oil sinks or if it stays afloat, if there's how well it adheres to the plumage, for example, of seabirds. And seabirds would be the most visible victims of oiling, really, in an oil spill, and even just a little speck of oil can destroy the waterproofness of the plumage, and then the animal gets hypothermic and has, well, it ingests oil, so all sorts of health effects that are visible then. So obviously these new fuels are very interesting to look into as well from an old wildlife perspective, both the behavior of them and then the effects that they have on the animals. So how toxic they are, what kind of skin lesions or skin burns do they cause, etc. And of course it's also like a health and safety issue for the responders, because obviously we have to take that very seriously working with.
Indeed, we saw pictures in one of Rodolfo's presentations of people just literally picking stuff up, oily things with their bare hands, and this is
Exactly, and
Of
that is
course.
one reason why having a professional oiled wildlife response as part of the overall oil spill response is so important, because, as I said earlier, otherwise people will self-mobilize and they will not know how to use adequate protective equipment, for example.
So, and just give us an overview as well, because we're talking about oiled wildlife, and I mean, birds being the most visible perhaps, and their plight when they get oiled is terrible. But give us an overview of how many species are we talking about here? We're talking also about fish, plankton, mammals, seals that we saw in the videos. Tell us sort of the various different, how do you divide up those responses?
Well, obviously, there is a huge difference in how you treat, for example, sea turtles or seabirds or mammals. You need to have different protocols developed for them. The EUROWA network has protocols for seabirds and it has a protocol for sea turtles. What we would like to look into next is, of course, the marine mammals side of things. Cetaceans, so whales and dolphins, are very difficult to deal with. Obviously, you need to have facilities, you need to be able to capture them, etc. So in that case, the first option would be to just avoid having them oiled in the first place. So, for example, making a strategy for the oil recovery that would minimize the effects on vulnerable areas and vulnerable species. But yeah, there's a lot still to be done there. Also, there's a wide range of different bird species which require different care. Some are more hardy, can be kept on ground, for example, harder ground. Others are very, very vulnerable. They're used to sitting on the sea all the time, so they easily get different injuries when they're kept on land out of their natural environment, so need to be kept in net bottom cages, for example. So all these things need to be taken into consideration, and some species do have a better survival rate than others. And of course, in every incident, you gain more information about it, how you can treat different species. And that's also why the monitoring afterwards, having a monitoring strategy for how you follow up long term on how these animals survive, for example, after being rehabilitated, is very important.
Mm-hmm. And yet one more question here for EUROWA. What can local governments do to better equip and train volunteers or the self-mobilizing citizens that you talked about? Because that's obviously an issue for everyone.
Yeah, I'd say the most important step would be to have that national authority, that is, or local authority, however you're organized in your country, who has a clear mandate and responsibility for oiled wildlife response. That is the first step. And then, as I said before, mapping out the stakeholders that you would have that would be able to, for example, become EUROWA network members, and that way access the standardized training, which really, makes it so much easier to work together in a spill as well, and then utilize the expertise that's out there and have this knowledge exchange. And that way is really the only way that you can then utilize the volunteers under a solid structure, so that you don't need to start training from scratch when something happens.
And another question here for you, Justiina, and possibly you've already answered this, but I'll ask it because it has been sent in here. Do you already have applied research experience with low sulfur fuels? We talked about the fingerprinting, which you don't do, but are you already looking at the implications of these low sulfur fuels?
Yes, we have conducted different spill response demonstrations to MDO, marine diesel oil, and MGO, marine gas oil, and also tried to recover them with different kind of recovery equipment, and then analyzed how was the recovery result, how effective it was, how much water came along with the recovery, and this kind of thing. We have also analyzed and tried to put down those characteristics of those fuels, so to be able to give some kind of even small type of instruction to rescue services, how to be prepared to these kind of fuels. But we are just getting started. We are quite novice in this field.
Quite a new undertaking.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting topic, and I know there is many types of fuels. We have just taken those that are most common here in Finland So I think there is much to do.
Thanks very much for that. Luuk, I'd like to know from you, because you took part in the DBX as well, and I'd like to just get your sense as a VR simulation guy. How did you see people respond to those simulations, and what kinds of learnings could you take from this encounter that you've had with this particular exercise? For future simulations, obviously.
Are you talking about the process, let's say since a year ago, or really this week?
No, I'm talking about really this week, because I'm very interested in the fact you talked about the importance of being able to do trial and error. Now, obviously, there was a limited time here, but in any of the scenarios that you would be employing this in a real training basis, you have the ability to play a scenario out that doesn't work. So how did that work in this particular context, and what kind of learnings could you take for future trainings and future simulation efforts?
Good question. It was
complicated, as my questions often are.
Before I came here, I was very curious what to expect.
To see what to expect.
Because I was sitting here in the corner. I had more of an assisting role, so I was curious to see how much interest there would be. And to be honest, I was a bit overwhelmed with the reactions. They were super positive, and of course I liked the videos, but they are made by my own company, so it was super nice to see the reactions from the audience, and also people really came up to me to talk about can you show this, can you show that, and to learn more. If you talk about takeaways that I can take away from this gathering, then I think that there's a lot of potential in the marine pollution side, also for us. We started here with the consortium that set up this EU MODEX, and we developed a few things as a start. But I see a lot of potential to go further in that and to really be able to create different scenarios in marine pollution.
And here's an interesting question for you that really sort of touches on the issue of trying to reduce carbon footprint, because of course we do all have to travel, and these trainings are incredibly intensive in terms of organization. Do you see an opportunity for teams and professionals training together in virtual reality to significantly reduce travel activity with this kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So what I tried to explain also in the presentation is there is the opportunity for remote training. So if you would want to do a training between different countries, so we learned a lot from each other in this week, I think. And if you want to proceed with that and really do let's say a tabletop exercise, then this system could be an interesting way to do that. You don't have to travel, you only need a stable internet connection.
Excellent, thank you very much. Maybe you could pass the microphone to Vanessa. And Vanessa, what would your takeaways be, considering we've had some very interesting discussions about these different types of fuels, but the question of conflict has also come up as to whether neighboring countries can't or won't contribute to a joint response. What are your takeaways, and where do you see? You had a number of gaps there, but what would be perhaps your three main priorities coming away from this DBX?
Well, I'd like to see, obviously, the countries that have, indicated that they would like to know more about wildlife response, learn more about it, maybe start developing their own national oiled wildlife response plan, to really go home and start that process and see what they can do. And of course the EUROWA network is happy to help out, and I hope that at least the first step would be for everyone to visit our website and familiarize themselves with how they could integrate the EUROWA network in their existing plans, if they have such plans, and consider what stakeholders they have in their own countries that could potentially join our network as well.
And also possibly get into the EU MODEX module system. Yeah,
absolutely. That would be, developing that further would be absolutely
I bring that up
essential.
again simply because there is a question here, how could the European Union foster better oiled wildlife response? That would be an obvious way, an obvious answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, looking at different country representatives here as well, just ensuring that you have an actual budget for oiled wildlife response activities to take place. And that's also something, of course, that the European Union can help out with in terms of project funding, for example.
Justiina, your takeaways and possibly your future outlook and what's next, given that you've actually started your simulator and have many interesting projects in the works.
Yeah, my first thought after these discussions, I feel how the importance of the research is highlighted here, and I have learned a lot during this exercise week, and there is also a couple of takeaways as common related to the different approaches the other countries have utilized, like shoreline protection methods or structured protocols how to inform the local residents in case of a spill. These are also those messages I'm taking home. I'm actually home, but still.
I was going to say, you don't have very far to go.
Yeah, and regarding to the future, I would, as was highlighted here many times today, but I also wish to stress out the urgent need for us to be capable to address the spills of new fuels and HNS. Mm-hmm. This is one of our options also as a research institute to contribute to that. And we are planning to develop our facility also to be able to provide different and diverse options for recovery, so we can be those test beds that are used to build up the capabilities. At least I hope so.
But it's interesting that a country with such a long shoreline as Finland, you were actually surprised at how much you learned here. You told me yesterday.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
From the inputs, I'm just trying to sort of get to the point of how fruitful it was to actually sort of bring this many different areas of expertise and areas of experience together.
Yeah, it's absolutely very fruitful and useful because all of us have different perspectives on the issue, so there is also added value when you put the brains together. So I think it has been very, very productive.
Anything else to add from our other two? I think with that, we will wrap up this panel discussion. It has certainly been very, very interesting, and I thank you all for your very informative presentations and for putting stuff out there that I think the civil protection and the marine response communities and the environmental agencies can all actually take home and start applying in terms of some homework and some new ways of approaching some of the problems that they're faced with. I would ask everybody to put their hands together for Luuk ten Bergen and Vanessa Ryan and Justiina Halonen. And thanks very much. And I could ask you to regain your seats because we're going to proceed to the final part of our day. Before we get to the outcomes and conclusions, I have a little something that we're going to use to kick off this final session, and we've received a video from Sweden. This is a world premiere because this video has never been shown, and we would just like to show this to you before I invite our final panelists up onto the stage as a shining example of national strategic cooperation. So film up.
Sverige har lång kustlinje. Det är mycket sjöfart som går runt omkring oss. Om det skulle hända någonting så är det stor sannolikhet att oljan hamnar på svensk kust.
Även om sådana olyckor sker väldigt sällan så kan de ju få en väldigt stor effekt.
Fartygen är ju säkrare idag, men risken finns ju fortfarande för de här stora utsläppen.
När det väl händer då går det väldigt fort och då är det viktigt att alla är inspelade på vad det är som gäller och vad man själv har för ansvar.
Utsläpp av olja ut med de svenska kusterna och i våra inlandsvatten orsakar allvarliga skador. Naturmiljön med sitt växt- och djurliv skadas, stränder kletas ned och bottnar förstörs.
Vissa utsläpp kan få irreversibla konsekvenser, det vill säga att det aldrig återhämtar sig.
Det är väl något av det värsta vi skulle kunna råka ut för i en kustkommun. Det påverkar naturligtvis såväl miljön som också det socioekonomiska, därför att en del av turistnäringen som vi har bygger ju faktiskt på att det är miljön man vill uppleva.
Vi hade ju ett antal stora oljeutsläpp i Östersjön under 80-talet. Och det skapade ju ett arbete och att bygga upp en förmåga, för den var ganska dålig innan.
Den nationella samverkansgruppen för oljeskadeskydd, NSO, bedriver samverkan före, under och efter en fartygsolycka med oljeutsläpp till sjöss. Gruppen har sedan mitten av 1980-talet bedrivit strategisk samverkan mellan ansvariga myndigheter och kustkommuner.
Det bygger på frivillighet och att vi har ett ömsesidigt behov och nytta av att samverka med varandra i de här frågorna. Och de här olyckorna spänner ju över hela spektrat från det lokala till det regionala, nationella och internationella. Så att vi har hela skalan då, från de små olyckorna till de stora miljökatastroferna som vi bevakar. Men NSOs fokus är ju framförallt då på de stora olyckorna. Vi har en långsiktig vision om att minimera miljöskada. Vi har en aktörsgemensam riskbild som ligger till grund för våra prioriteringar. Och vi har då en handlingsplan som är mer konkret, som listar i närtid olika aktiviteter vad var och en behöver göra de närmaste åren. Och vi har också en årlig konferens som vi arrangerar, så vi försöker nå våra aktörer ute i Kustsverige.
Ja, när det sker ett utsläpp så är det är ganska många som behöver samverka. Även om det kanske är en kommun som har blivit drabbad så finns det många aktörer runt omkring. Och det handlar mycket om samverkan, få dit personer som kanske är väldigt kunniga i vissa områden. Saneringsföretag, ekotoxikologer och så vidare då.
När stora olyckor väl händer ställs höga krav på kunskap. Utbildning, övning och utveckling blir därför avgörande för att upprätthålla förmåga att hantera olyckor.
Vissa kanske aldrig kommer vara med om det och vissa kommer bara vara med om det någon gång, och då gäller det att vara så förberedd som möjligt. Vi behöver lära oss av de få händelser som sker nationellt i Sverige, men också kanske i Europa och internationellt.
Det är även vi som deltar i NSO som deltar i de internationella samarbetena, så att vi kan hämta hem den bilden också till vårt nationella arbete.
Framtiden är oviss. Större fartyg och ökad sjöfart är två möjliga trender. En ökad automatisering och större produktion av biobränslen är två andra.
Man jobbar ju mycket med att få ner fossilberoendet, och då kommer det komma nya typer av bränsle som ersätter det här, som vi har väldigt dålig koll på idag, vad de har för miljöeffekter.
Det finns en ambition från myndigheterna att öka andelen gods som sjötransporteras via inre vattenvägar, det vill säga sjöar. Mälaren kanske har upp till en tredjedel av Sveriges befolkning får sitt dricksvatten därifrån. Och utsläpp i en sån sjö kan naturligtvis få allvarliga samhällskonsekvenser.
Alla organisationer idag upplever sig ha mer och mer att göra, och då finns ju risken för de här sällanhändelserna att det helt enkelt prioriteras ner. Då är det viktigt att vi har en grupp som fortfarande behåller kompetensen och inriktningen för hur Sveriges oljeskadeskydd bedrivs.
Det är ju en dröm egentligen att vi ska kunna samarbeta så bra som möjligt, för det är det handlar om i de här situationerna när det händer en olycka.
Let's have a round of applause. For that video brought to us personally from Sweden, from the NSO, and I know that she's preaching to the converted here, but we'll hear a little bit more about why that video came together, because she's part of our next panel. So it has been a very busy week, productive week, and a very busy and long day, but we've finally reached our concluding panel. And I'd like to ask Gian-Marco Desogus, who's representing the Commission. He's from the ERCC desk office in Brussels, to come up on stage. Please give him a round of applause. And Mevric Zammit is here as well. He was involved in the design of this exercise scenario that you used this week. He's from the Maritime Authority in Malta. Come on up, Mevric, take a seat. Sonja, the star, one of the stars of the video we just saw, is a participant here from the NSO in Sweden, so please give her a warm welcome. And here she is on the stage. And also joining us for this final discussion is Tiziana Chieruzzi, who's a participant from Italy. And let's get her up on stage here. And I guess I'm going to hand this microphone first to you, Sonja. Take a seat there, Tiziana. Get everybody up on stage here. So, thank you all for being here, and we want to basically look at where are we going with this from here? From here, where's the next direction? And first of all, what I'd like to do is get some feedback from Sonja on what that video was. It mentioned almost every aspect that has come up in our discussions today. And of course, it was a cold call for me. I hadn't seen it before, so there's too much in it for me to regurgitate it. Tell us why you put that together, and for who was it directed at?
Thank you. Yeah, this was an information film because we have so many stakeholders. I think Sweden is extreme in this aspect, that we have a very decentralized system. So it means we have so many stakeholders, and people have a tendency to change jobs more frequently nowadays, and we felt that we had a need to have a better communication material of how we are working on a national level, on a strategic level, with this topic of oil spill preparedness and response. So yes, we had, there was a lot of information in this film, but it's always about the person behind. You know, we have there is a need for competence, and the human resource is such a key to this. And we have a lot of support on national level. We have heard about all the support systems and the mechanisms that we have on EU level and so on. But for this to reach down to the person who is actually going to have this thrown in their lap when something happens, the awareness is not, it's a challenge for us to raise awareness and to really you know, inform about the risks and also all the capacities that we have on a systems level. So I would say that the target group for us is quite wide for this. We're targeting all stakeholders that are concerned on all levels, and it's cross-sectorial. There is, as you know, all the transport agencies, the environment side, there is legal aspects, there is so many different aspects, and most of us don't work with these issues on a daily basis, so we're not experts. When something happens, it will probably be the first time. So awareness raising is a challenge, and it's something that we're addressing with this film.
And it looks like it'll be quite a successful one. It certainly had a great response here. What would you say are the most important outcomes of this DBX EU MODEX for you this past week?
For me, I think we're throwing around big words here, the holistic integrated approach. It's a mouthful, yeah?
Yeah.
But it's actually...
it actually means something.
It actually means something, and when you come to the concrete dealing with an incident, just like we heard in the morning here, the examples, the success factor is always collaboration, that we cooperate and coordinate together, and we know this is what is needed in a big disaster. But still, I think if we are honest, looking at our work, how we are working with these issues in the different sectors and all the different levels and so on, there is a lot of walls between us still, especially when it comes to prevention and preparedness development. So we are training on our own, we are exercising our own systems, and we are building our own plans many times. So this is, I mean, an organizational and legal aspects also create these walls between us, but we need somehow to break down these walls and have a more holistic integrated approach to this. So that's something I would like to at least try to find ways, to hammer maybe, to break down some walls and also bring the holistic approach into the preparedness and to maybe have joint plans. Maybe we need to, you know, this is a very good tool that we were testing this week with the DBX exercise format, because it helps us to break down walls.
Great. So helping to break down walls, perhaps you could pass the microphone over to Tiziana. And what were the most important outcomes for you? I'd like to hear your perspective on the week.
We have a very good outcome from the workshop, because, as you know, Italy have unfortunately very big experiences with oil spill, because in 1991 we had the Havant most bigger incident of oil spill in Ligurian Sea. So we start very early to think about it. So for sure we have plans. We don't have the wildlife plans. So Vanessa suggestion and Hugo, it's very important for us. So we for sure, like me, that I work for the environmental ministry, we will take home the suggestion to put in place the wildlife plan, national contingency plan. And for sure we are thinking about the HNS response at sea and inland. But this kind of exercise is very interesting, because we also have to improve our capacity of working together with the authorities that manage the sea, the Coast Guard and the Minister of Environment, and the authorities that manage the coastal area impacted by the oil or by the HNS. So it's very interesting, and for sure we bring us at home all the experiences that we share during the Mediterranean table, but also listening to the other countries. So it's really a very good experiences, and we hope that we can have more than this one.
So that's the cue for Gian-Marco here to get handed a microphone, Gian-Marco, because you also took part and were telling me how important this entire exercise seemed to you for the mapping of stakeholders. And I mean, Sonja already mentioned that the number of stakeholders that they're dealing with in Sweden alone is huge. What could be a possible next step or steps based on the outcomes of the EU MODEX DBX that you've experienced here this week?
Thank you, Karin. Well, actually, I think here we have a very good starting point. So what Sonja already was mentioning, the fact that actually this exercise was a novelty, because we were
pioneering, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly, and we were able to bring together those actors that, in general, were not training together. So we had civil protection authorities, maritime responders, but also the private sector, insurance company, legal advisors. So what Sonja was mentioning is actually very important. So we are going towards an holistic approach, also starting from the exercise point of view, and hopefully we can bring it in the real emergencies. Also because the crisis nowadays cannot be seen anymore as monosectorials.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the experience that we recently had, like COVID-19 or even the war in Ukraine, are showing us that the intersectorial approach is actually needed.
Yeah.
If we take the example of COVID, actually it was not just a proper health emergency. It was much more than that, because member states had to think about strategic production of medical items, for instance. Or let's take the example of security of the data, because out of the sudden, most of us were sent home to work, right? So our institution, our companies were not ready yet for that thing. So that crisis showed us that the intersectorial approach is what we are actually looking for. And this, I think, it is a very important starting point, the one that we developed during this exercise. As a Commission, I think it would be very important to bring the outcome of this exercise in the proper context. One could be, for instance, the Civil Protection Committee, which is a committee that regularly meets in Brussels and bringing together experts from the member states and participating states to the mechanism in order to assess and implement the mandate under the UCPM. So evaluate the current status of art and also possibly suggest improvements. And another important context can be the knowledge network, which is a hub recently created by the Commission in 2021, which is indeed a hub of sharing knowledge, which brings together not just the first responders and the experts in civil protection, but also the scientists, also the private sector. And by, let's say, through this hub, I think that the outcome of this exercise would be also a very good food for thought. And last but not least, of course, this exercise has also shown that there might still be some gaps to fill in the response. And the Commission is pretty much keen to support those member states and participating states that would like to upgrade the existing resources or to, let's say, create new resources in order to tackle those emergencies. There are already instruments and tools under the mechanism that can support the member states towards this new support.
Okay, so that's good news. That the outlook is good there. As you talked about the scenario, as a scenario planner, Mevric, because you took part in kind of actually creating this sort of this mashup disaster that everybody was dealing with for this week. Are the outcomes of the exercise and what you've heard from the participants, do they meet your expectations? Did it achieve what you set out to achieve?
So first of all, thank you. Yes, unfortunately, I was one of the culprits, that was involved in the design of the scenario. The scenario was a complex maritime disaster. We had
keep the microphone a little closer.
We needed to reach the desired outcome to ensure that the national capabilities, are overstretched, and that regional support and international support and EU support will.
So you, if I understand correctly, you did a little bit of this engineering for failure almost. You built into the scenario.
No, definitely. Definitely.
That Luuk was talking about.
The scenario was quite complex, and in reality, it's not. It's a bit difficult to have all the different aspects and events in one incident. So it was the plan. That was the plan originally. Yes, having been around the participants and also listening to their feedback, I think we did reach the desired expectations. Yes, especially when it came to the third phase, the environmental impacts. We did witness the participants working closely together. And at times it was quite stressful because there were too many things going on, and they couldn't prioritize. And in such cases, priority is key. When you have a container ship on fire with a number of dangerous cargo on board, different cargoes with different characteristics, some that can dissolve in water, some can sink, some can float. So you need to prioritize, and that was one of the key messages.
What would you do differently, having seen how this particular exercise functioned, and what kinds of outcomes it achieved, and having heard that it was really probably just a starting point? What do you take with you from this event? What could you do differently, and what might you do differently in order to incorporate different competencies?
No, I think if I would be involved in future exercises and in the planning, I think we would have the scenario a little bit less complex, so that we can allow more time for the participants to focus on certain important aspects. Even when it comes to information, we know that during incidents, information is key. And there were phases where there weren't much information available, and there were phases where there were a lot of information, which is the reality. So you can get a lot of information. So I think in future exercises, we will try to have the information more in a systematic approach, you know, so that all the different stakeholders know what to look for. Because if certain information that is usually available for maritime authorities, all right, this information was well looked for and was found, but there were other players that this information was not relevant for them, and they were not aware of what to expect. So I think this is something that we can take home with us for future planning.
Tiziana, I see you nodding your head a lot, so I'd like to hear your feedback in terms of this overload of information and the complexity of the situation, and then we'll come back to Sonja.
In our group, we very much appreciate the complexity of the complexity of the exercise, because really we have to think to all the experts, and so we really had a lot of work to do. But as he said, we probably have all the information all together, and we have to have more time to analyze all the information, or otherwise have the information step by step in order to have the time to really go into. But in general, it was a very good point to think about all the experts, because in the real time, as he told, it's quite difficult to have all the emergency all together, but
it was raising some flags, telling you who needs to possibly also be there.
Yes,
even if they weren't in reality. Yeah.
Yes, but in Italy we had the last incident that we activate the plan with the French guys and with Monte Carlo in 2018, and the two container ship was completely broken by another ships going into, so we have to manage with something like that. So and
the situation is complex.
Yes, yeah. yes, but
no
more complexity in the exercise. It's a very good point.
Okay,
to think
Sonja,
about.
your feedback on
yes.
what Mevric said.
We heard in the morning, I think it was George who said, everyone knows what to do. In the beginning of in the alarm phase, there is protocols and plans, and they will just follow procedures, something like that. But and the systems are there. I mean, we have good systems, but over time. And now the scenario was extreme, but also in a normal spill situation, the complexity increases over time. More stakeholders become involved, and more sectors, and so on. It just grows. So it's really important. My point here is that we have to balance our investment between the systems and the people who are using the systems, because the system won't be better than the people who are using them.
So that's a call for more training.
More
as well.
training, exactly. Yeah. And we missed some of the key stakeholders here, and we know a lot of people have a lot of important work to do, building systems, for example, and not taking maybe enough time and investment to raise the competence. And that's really something for us to consider, like how much time and effort are we building, like the system versus the human behind the system. We have to have that perspective with us, especially now with the increasing complexity and challenges that we are facing.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you very much. And one more question then for our two participants, because I think this is a point that we need to at least have spoken about, for the benefit of the organizers. Before we organize, Tiziana, perhaps I can come back to you with this. Before we organize something like this on an EU regional level, should such an exercise as what you've done this week be replicated on a national level? Do you think that would be helpful?
Oh yes, for sure, and we are very happy because we program to do meeting both with land and sea in Italy, involving, because in Italy we have 2 national plans for 2 different levels of emergency, 3 different levels of emergency. Level 1, we involve the local plans. For Tier 2, we involve environmental ministry plan, and for Tier 2, we involve the Department of Civil Protection plans. And so we decide to make meetings in each Marine Directorate, that it's a large-scale area of the sea, meeting the Coast Guard and the land authorities that are going to manage with the oil spill. And we are just going to organize that. We are thinking about how the meeting can be, and we are here with the civil protection, with the Coast Guard, and with our technical support that is an institute of research. And every step we said, oh, in Italy we can do the same. Okay, it's a very good point. We can divide the people like that. So really it is. And from Italy point of view, for sure, we have also to think about the Mediterranean area. So sometimes we were very happy that REMPEC was there, the center of Malta, because Mediterranean has also a country that doesn't join us in the European exercise. So sometimes because they don't fix us the location, and so sometimes we have to manage with the South Africa countries.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that came up in one of the earlier panels, is how useful would it be to bring in to bring into future exercises groups from other regions, North Africa, for instance?
Yes, so coming from a marine pollution authority of one of the Mediterranean countries, Malta, yes, I think it is important, but first and foremost we have to ensure that if we are going to involve the North African countries, they are made aware of all the existing mechanisms and tools that are also available for the EU countries, and that such tools are available also for them, because then it will be useless to have them participating with us, but they cannot make use of what is available for the EU. Otherwise, we will not be on a level playing field.
So that requires some outreach.
Yes.
For the development of future.
In my opinion, before having them with us, joining us for an exercise, they should receive training and at least have the necessary availability of at least some of the tools.
Final word from you, Sonja. Would a national level exercise of this nature be something that you would?
Yeah, for sure.
Sign on to.
Yeah, that's something we could consider in Sweden. And also bringing in, like we did here with the subject matter experts, I think that was also a very good and new approach with this exercise. And I think that's really important, because once you are standing there and you are having some hard decisions, it's really good having someone behind your back saying this is the right way to go.
To look at this.
Because there is always going to be conflict and political other interests that collide with your contingency plan. And if you have someone who knows what they're talking about, say this is the right thing to do, please, you need to bring them in. And those people might not even be available on a national level. So that's a question also, that what support do we need, and is that something also that we need to consider on a regional or EU level, so that we really have that support when we need it.
Thanks very much for that, Gian-Marco. Perhaps just a final word from you after hearing the feedback also from the participants and how they experience this and what could go forward.
Thank you. No, I mean, from the Commission point of view, we really welcome the let's say the feedback that the participants are given after this exercise. And again, we try to make ourselves available for the support in order for the member states to develop whatever resources they might consider useful towards this type of emergencies. We have seen here that there are a number of actors involved involved, which is relevant. We have many entities involved, the ministries, rescue teams, and many other actors. But the common, let's say, sense of the mechanism is to try to build common standards. To go towards a real European civil protection that could really speak the same language, and I'm not just talking about
real language.
but in terms of standards, in terms of interoperability. So we can only welcome the feedback from the member states and give all the support necessary in order for them to build a further and better capacity response.
Well, with 14 nations represented here today, I think, and this week, I think you've made a very good start on that. And thank you very much for that input and for taking all of the outcomes here back to Brussels to your colleagues. So obviously a lot of ideas and solutions have been discussed here, raised awareness for the existing support mechanisms and capacities, raised awareness between one another of the capacities of each of the different bodies, whether working on land or at sea, or in terms of the environmental efforts that are being done. A lot of challenges were brought up. Still today, there's always going to be challenges, and I think we haven't seen the last of them in 2023. There's many, many more to come, but certainly a value placed on research here, and research and adaptation efforts underway, and cross-sectoral approaches. Apparently something that is really going to bring fruit in this civil protection and emergency response sector. Thank you very much for all of your hard work, to our participants, to all of the participants in the room. Thank you to the participants in our virtual cyberspace who took part and sent in their questions, and will hopefully spin off. We'll have some spin-off effect with the video, and you can share some of these outcomes with your colleagues. Thanks very much, Gian-Marco and Mevric and Sonja and Tiziana. Thanks to all of you, and I guess we know that this was a pioneering DBX EU MODEX, so I guess you can shake hands tonight and say, see you at the next one. Take good care, and all the best to you.
Thank you.